Hi, I'm Rutledge,
Hey, I'm Connor.
and we're Friend Stream Sports. We're real friends who do real sports in real time and real fun. And Connor, I'm really hyped about tonight. How about you?
Rutledge, I am really happy, and you sound really clear tonight. Any new gear you're sporting?
Oh man, I got a Arctic Pro headset from my wife for my birthday. So this is a like award-winning headset that she got me, and it's wireless, and it has a new mic on it, and it has a mute button. Look, you totally missed what I just said. So um, feel really good about
Well,
this. So I got some gear upgrades. So I'm gonna
but
come in crystal clear.
one can only assume you said shout out to our wives, the real MVPs of Friends Stream Sports.
Yes, I did say shout out to our wives, the real MVPs of Friends Stream Sports, the people that let us stream sports in our houses. But
No doubt.
but yeah, it's here. We're ready. We already have a viewer this evening, so thank you for joining us. Before we get started, Connor, we want to take a moment to acknowledge one of our local Florida athletes. So, for the people in the world, tell them about the Florida basketball player who's having a tough time, who needs our thoughts out there, Connor.
Ooh, yeah. First shout out goes to Keontae Johnson, who he was the SEC preseason Player of the Year pick. Collapsed on the floor against Florida State. Apparently is in stable yet critical condition, and is is going to be on the road to recovery for sure. So shout out to him. Shout out to his medical team and his doctors, and we hope and pray for a speedy recovery.
Yeah, if you haven't watched the video, we recommend you get out there and check it out. It's they score and then he goes down. So it was in Tallahassee, which rivalries are always big. Another shout out to Sarah Fuller. So it was announced on Twitter yesterday. Sarah Fuller's football career has ended because Vanderbilt's last game has been canceled due to COVID protocols. But this past weekend, she did score two successful points, doing two PAT attempts, and of course has played in two college football games. So I personally love that. On the back of her helmet, she had "Play Like a Girl" as like a sign of strength. So want to give a huge shout out to Sarah Fuller. We at French Stream Sports are really happy for you that you were able to just have a huge year in 2020.
2 for 2 in extra points. 2 games played. Too good to be true. Sarah Fuller, 2020. Lots of twos happening. But we're into it. We're into the number 2 tonight, that's for sure. Because we have two AFC West rivals here this evening in the Oakland via Madden circa 2020, Las Vegas Madden circa 2021 Raiders versus the always and forever in Denver Broncos.
Connor, I really feel like you're trying to pick your winning streak further by giving me bad teams to play as since you've been picking the games currently. So I'm going to give it my best here with this throwback 75th anniversary Broncos uniform and see what happens.
Hey, just wait till my ill-timed interception.
I have a pretty good defense tonight, so we'll see how this is going to go. Speaking of some ill-timed interceptions and some scorings, did you see the blowouts that were happening this weekend in college football?
This was not a good week for a lot. This was both a great week and not a good week for a lot of college football teams. That's for sure, Rutledge. Where do you want to begin?
I kind of want to start in the great state of Arizona, to which Herm Edwards has proved that he can be a coach again, and Kevin Sumlin not so much, because the Arizona Wildcats lost 70 points to 7 to the Arizona State Sun Devils. As rivalry games go, that's got to be a tough one to sit there and watch. But Connor, what's happening to Kevin Sumlin?
If you kind of track his career, he was a very hot commodity at Houston, went to Texas A&M, could not put it together, played some decent ball at Texas A&M coaching-wise, had Johnny Manziel. Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator, so really was able to put together some good seasons at the beginning, kind of trailed off due to high expectations that usually occur in Aggie land. Currently, or throughout his tenure at Arizona, Kevin Sumlin went 9-20, including 0-5 this year. You could look at that in a variety of different ways, as Sumlin had to, take the Rich Rodriguez roster and morph that. He obviously did not do that quite well. And I think there's a lot of coaches who were able to implement sort of this spread, run and shoot attempt, type offense version 1.0 in this new college football world. And quite frankly, a lot of coaches have caught up to that. And, got folks like Kevin Sumlin are being a little bit exposed. So, wish him the best. It stinks that this happens right around Christmas, but also, he should have won more football games. So, you gotta, you don't get a free ride all the time. So, what about any thoughts? Did you get to watch Arizona at all? I mean, what do you think about Arizona and the state of the program in Pac-12 right now?
Arizona's been weird because, as we remember, they had Rich Rodriguez for a while. He tried to make it work, and now they have Kevin Sumlin, and they keep going through these power hire coaches that are just not kind of fitting there. I'm personally happy for Herm Edwards because when that was announced that he was going there, I was a little confused because he had been in the broadcast booth and the ESPN for so long that the fact that they're making that work. So good for him, but it definitely feels like a lopsided thing. As a child, I was a little bit more Arizona State than Arizona, so it makes me happy to see the Sun Devils kind of put up 70 points on the Wildcats, being on the West Coast. The other game I want to talk about, which was surprising this weekend, Connor, was UNC and Mac Brown putting up 62 points and destroying Miami. I cannot believe. I knew that was going to be a good game. We had kind of previewed it earlier in the year. We both knew that UNC was going to do something. We were hoping Miami was better than what they are. But my goodness, 62 points. I think it was 510 rushing yards. I know Barstool Sports made a whole bunch of memes about it. But Connor, what are your thoughts on the fact that UNC is like, even though it's a basketball school, they put down a football whooping, which they usually are on the receiving end of?
Yeah, I think the bigger story, in my opinion, there is what happened to Miami, right? I think in a lot of ways you could look at Miami being, not excited about not getting to play for the ACC championship game due to how the ACC kind of made their rules to make sure that Notre Dame and Clemson were going to play in the ACC championship game. But you still got to play, man, and that's no good this year in particular, as bowl games are really determined by the eye test and things like that. And you've got some issues there with Miami. I think Mac Brown, from where UNC was to where they can be, and where the ceiling can be. Mac Brown can recruit. Mac Brown can get players in, and Mac Brown can definitely do some things there. Their quarterback at UNC was a Florida State commit before he changed his mind. So, they do have some good players. But, man, that was definitely a surprise. Stephen Kicklighter, who was the co-host in your absence last week, actually texted me to remind me about how poor my Miami pick was over UNC this week. So, I don't get all my picks right. That's for sure. But yeah, we had a lot of interesting games. Florida State with the big win over Duke. Did you see the big news coming out of Florida State, Rutledge?
No, what's the big news, Connor? Tell us about Florida State.
So former UCF Knight, now soon to be Florida State Seminole, Mackenzie Milton is apparently transferring from UCF to finish his career out at Florida State. So he gets to be in the spread offense there with Coach Norvell, gets to be in Tallahassee, and really gets to see what he's made out of in a Power 5 type situation. So hopefully things are turning around for Florida State, because I'm not going to lie, Rutledge, this year was a pretty cruddy year to be a Florida State fan. So that we are very excited to see what happens with the beloved Noles in Tallahassee.
I think Mackenzie Milton going to Florida State is bigger than just for his personal career. This will prove out there if group of 5 players are good, or if they're just good against, as you call them, sociology majors. Because if Mackenzie Milton can go into Florida State, and if he can outplay Clemson, and he can also outplay North Carolina, that will just show that other football players deserve respect. It's a lot of pressure on his shoulders I don't think he realizes. Um, but it's crazy
Oh
how
yeah.
many blowouts were happening this weekend. This weekend wasn't the biggest blowout. Connor, you know of our favorite historic blowout of all time. Do you remember that score that we talked about earlier this week?
Yes, the Georgia Tech versus Cumberland State game. Uh, Give us a little history lesson here as we close out the first quarter and
So,
this monster game.
long time ago, in the year 1916, there's a small school called Cumberland State University, which is in Lebanon, Tennessee, which there is our first quarter pick. I was waiting for it to happen. Lebanon, Tennessee is the actual home of where Cracker Barrel started, for all of you country fried steak lovers out there. But um, Georgia Tech, with their coach John Heisman, was an absolute powerhouse in the mid 1910s. Cumberland State that spring had disbanded their football program, but they could not, if they were not going to play the game, it was going to cost them $3,1916, which is like $30,000 today. So they decided to grab whatever they could have and play this game. And I only imagine it being a conversation like, "Hello there. Would you like to represent Cumberland State in the 1916 football game against Georgia's Institute of Technology? Come on down and represent the Bulldogs." And then they just got slaughtered, 222-0. The stat I grabbed was Georgia Tech ran 29 offensive plays. All were rushes totaling 501 yards. Cumberland State finished with negative 28 yards. So if you ever think you're having a bad day, you are not on the receiving end of that sack, and you are not a Cumberland State football player from the 1916 season. So,
Sheesh. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There was no Cumberland State Georgia Tech type games, although it might have felt like it. Definitely, that did not happen.
that was not what went on. But Connor, we talk about blowouts. So Bama beat Arkansas 52-3, and we'll break that down in the SEC championship part of our show. Um, but what do you think about teams now? It seems like now more than ever in college football, not in professional baseball, but in college football, running up the score is just what you do. So how do you feel about that?
You know, as a in my college football career, spending most of the time as a second string player, I generally felt really excited when the mighty Wheaton Thunder were up by roughly 5 to 6 touchdowns at halftime or during at any point during the game. And I can't wait next season to talk to some Division III Wheaton College, at least give Wheaton College shout outs and pick Wheaton College football games all year. But, you know, whenever we got in, right, it was never, as a second string unit, it was never the question of, okay, we're just going to run the ball a bunch, this, that, or the other. I mean, you were in there to compete, man. You were in there to play and you were in there to execute. So, I think if you're Alabama and you leave Mac Jones in all game and you're beating up on some team 90-9, okay, that's one thing. But if you got the second and third string players in, you cannot expect them to not try to execute and try to play. So I think that this okay, you just got to run the ball, but no, man, you got to stop good players. And quite frankly, you're a starting team and you're a starting player more than likely, unless the other head coach pulled out their ones. And it's two teams executing and playing ball. So I think that you can have some egregious type things that you do, and that's always something to just look out for. But you're just running offense, man. You're just running offense. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm not a oh, you gotta run the ball and milk the clock and this, that, and the other.
I think
So
nowadays, sorry, learning my mute button. I think nowadays that what it's really shown with running the score is it's what gets the committee's attention. If you're going to put out 50, 60 points against a bad team, you're really showing the committee like, hey, we're someone to be reckoned with, and that's who we are, and that's what we do. Um, but I agree. Arkansas had every chance to stop Alabama from scoring those 52 points, and they couldn't do anything about it. Same thing with Arizona against Arizona State. And you got to look at it. Did you, as a player, did you just quit? Did you give up? Or are they that much better than you? So it really comes from within, and the horse neighs in Mile High Stadium. It really comes from within, and what do you have made for yourself? So I'm all about running up the score in the sense of are you not competitive enough to stop it? Something else running up the score is Army-Navy this weekend was a 15-0 game. So in our pre-show, Connor, you asked the question, is that running up the score? So how do you feel to see an Army-Navy game 15-0?
Definitely being a former offensive lineman with the second pick of the game for Derek Carr, that's more of my style kind of football game. There was a lot of running that happened. Definitely not the type of blowouts that you've seen before. A few that we noted: Navy 51, Army 0. Navy 58, Army 12. This is the first Paul Johnson year. Even last year, Navy 31, Army 7. So definitely not a blowout, but pitching a shutout in Army Navy is always is always interesting, because although you got a lot of ball control type teams, you can still march down the field. These option offenses can be tricky to stop, and I think it's always important to just remember how hard they can be to stop, and you gotta have a good, not just a good athletically sound team, but a very disciplined team to stop these option attacks.
Did you mention the 1973 Army-Navy game where Navy put up 51-0, and Cleveland Cooper, the quarterback at the time, had 102 yards and 3 touchdowns?
I sure did.
I'm glad we did. I wanted to give that one respect. And it comes with.
Speaking of that, I know that's always a big. It's used to be a much bigger game, national title implications. But what do you think about Rutledge? What do you think about the Army-Navy game, just as today in terms of significance?
I think the Army-Navy game. Oh crap. I think the Army-Navy game nowadays is underappreciated. Before we go into that, I want to go back to our running up the score topic and our user Veneros, which is our good friend. Stephen Kicklighter says, I'm not exactly opposed to running up the score, but after your 2 to 3 scores, it's time to sub in your second string, still run with it. That's on the other team. We're putting lesser talented guys. It's your job to stop them. And I agree with that in results to many games where that's going to happen, like Bama, Arkansas, or the SEC championship game, which we'll get there. But as far as Army-Navy goes, Connor, I will admit I didn't appreciate it as much until I watched Lee Corso talk about that is the rivalry game you have to go to. And I think maybe back in the day, to your point, maybe way back in the day, that was a really big deal. But now it's, in a normal football season, it's played at the end of the season, after championship weekend. Yes, it's on CBS, but we're all kind of waiting for the playoff. And I think TV ratings-wise, like the SEC championship game and the ACC championship game are going to get way better ratings. But the Army-Navy game is so much more significant because these are people that are going to go and serve our country, but they're playing football. I personally want to go to it. So maybe we do Friend Stream Sports live from the Army-Navy game in the parking lot.
That would be great. I'm super down for that.
But I wish we would appreciate it more, but I don't know how we'll get there based off the nature of today's college football general audience. What do you think would boost more people to watch the Army-Navy game, Connor?
I think if you had two, winning teams, right? I think two. You don't have to be undefeated and all that type of teams, but if you had, say, an 8-win Army team versus let's say a 7-win Navy team, or vice versa, or maybe one team that is undefeated going into this, ranked pretty highly, right? Potential to be a New Year's Six type team. I think it really comes down to continued wins, continually being a strong program, especially if you had both of those programs as being very, very strong. I think that's quite frankly how you get that back into consideration as a big time game that everyone's watching.
I'm totally with you. It has to have. It's kind of like the year that everyone watched Kansas versus Missouri rivalry game. That had weight to it, and that was 2 top 10 teams.
Is that making fun of Kansas coach Mark Mangino because he was very, very large?
No,
that's pretty rude, Rutledge.
No, I was making fun of his chins, not just Mark Mangino, but all 3 of his chins. I've had Baconators the size of Mark Mangino's chins.
Those are small Baconators.
No, it was all of his chins.
All of his chins. Got it. Got it.
But as far as Army-Navy games, Steven, our good friend, says he wants to go, so I think that would be a really good time. us heading up there to either Maryland or to West Point, watching a game just to get out there. But until we get it to where it means something, we have to glue it. In our last 1 minute, I want to talk about one other team that the world's glued to that I just don't understand anymore, and that's Ohio State. And this take comes from, I work in hospitality, so I met an Ohio State fan, and it was Saturday. I was like, oh, Michigan's canceled, how you feel about it? And they said, well, I guess you just can't count us out. I don't understand right now, alluding to the fact that they're in the championship game and the rules for the championship game changed so Ohio State could play. So Connor, I want to pose this up to you. We talk about group of 5 teams, and we talk about the landscape of college football and how it's really hard for like a Cincinnati or a UCF to get in the playoff, or Coastal Carolina. But is the playoff kind of unfairly supporting Ohio State? And has the Big Ten kind of just turned into a group of 5 conference, which how bad the rest of the conference is?
This year is definitely a down year for the Big Ten, for sure. And I think that that's just getting more and more and more obvious, the kind of struggles that the Big Ten has. I think that especially this year with Notre Dame being a part of the ACC, so you got Notre Dame and Clemson, and you got some pretty solid teams in the ACC. I think that where the Big Ten used to be able to say, well, we're probably the second best conference, in the country, that is definitely not the case this year. They're probably closer to the 5th best of the Power 5 out of all the conferences, with Ohio State really propping it up. And I think that in a lot of ways, Alabama can cover for a multitude of not great SEC teams. Not every team is as good as Alabama. Not every team is going to go win all their games. And I think that Ohio State is really having to shoulder a lot of the load this year. In terms of the playoffs, I think that there are going to be some athletic directors that are okay with how this went down, because let us not forget, if you make the playoffs, your conference gets $6 million. Ohio State will earn $6 million for the Big Ten if they make it. So, it's shoot, if you're Illinois, if you're Northwestern, yeah, you'd be way down to get that, and to get that money, to do with it what you will. Hopefully that's to put back into your football program. But, this is definitely a bad year for the Big Ten, and I think that it could be the sign of more trouble to come for the Big Ten.
I want to also put out there, I don't think there's really been a great time for the Big Ten. I think it's just sort of a mess. Look at Michigan State when they went to the playoff in 2015, which I forgot about when I was pulling up this data. They got swept by Alabama 38-0. Indiana, which is a major Big Ten competitor this year, their last winning season besides this year was 2007. So I think you're right, where it's a conference where they're really they're in trouble. Yes, Ohio State is kind of carrying the financial burden and moving them along, but there is something to be said about, you could have Alabama at the top, but what's the rest of the conference like? And it seems like the rest of the conference is not supporting them. Before we go into halftime,
I to warm us up here, I left 1 second on the clock.
Because
I need to. I want to have a pre-halftime warm take, if you will.
I was wondering why you just dive bombed into the grass.
Because there's a question that I need to ask you. There's 2 teams that are 5-0, undefeated Power 5 teams playing for conference title games. One of them is Ohio State. The other one is Southern Cal. How would you compare both of those teams, assuming that Ohio State and Southern Cal are 6-0 undefeated conference champions?
Wow. Is this a warming up question?
This is
hot and fresh out the kitchen. This could be, there's a song about this, but we can't afford to say it. Oh my goodness. I think right now, if I had to pick between the two of them, I would take USC.
Whoa.
I would put USC above Ohio State, in that USC wins in a variety of ways. They came back and they beat what looked like Chip Kelly finally figured it out, the UCLA team. While I could say that you would say the Pac-12. I believe the Pac-12 is a more consistent grind of B-level teams than the Big Ten, where you have one or two A-level teams, maybe A-minus teams, and then a bunch of F teams that just have famous names on them, like Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska. If you play a mediocre level game against Arizona State, that's what you expected to play. But if they go out and then put 70 points on their rival, you don't see that score in the Big Ten, but you do see those things happen out in the Pac-12. Stephen
Hmm.
Kicklider out here says he would put the Big Ten over the Pac-12, so he disagrees with me. I guess we're fighting now, Stephen. You're no longer invited to the Army-Navy trip.
We'll drink his
Uh,
Bud Light.
we will drink his, but I know, if we get Bud Light, we buy Steven's producer role. That's how we're going to afford not having to do all the work that we do.
No
Um,
doubt. Well, I was curious what your thought was.
what's your take, Connor? Who would you take, Ohio State or USC? Would you fight
you
on?
know, I think it would be, I think it would be more fun. I think it'd be more fun to talk about USC because they would be the biggest underdog just because we haven't talked about them as much all year. If it came down to literally those two teams, I think that uh, you know I would go. I would really want to make the best case possible for Southern Cal. So I'd do everything I could to legitimately pick USC to make it in the playoffs over Ohio State. That's how I feel about that.
Maybe it's the early 2000s in me, but something about USC competing for championships just feels really good.
College football is better when USC is good.
College
You know,
football's
they're
better when the USC is good, when Reggie Bush is out there, when his parents' free house, or the juice is on the loose, or something, right? So many great things.
hmm
All right, so
Well,
this halftime hot take, we want to frame up a little bit, and to our viewers, Manny and Steven out there, we'd love for you to participate. Um, by the way, before we jump into halftime hot take, Connor, I don't know if you know this, but we have cool friends out there named Carmen and Gabe. They have a podcast called Dude Thoughts, and over Thanksgiving they wanted to share what they were thankful for, and they're thankful for small businesses. So we gave them a shout out. They gave us a shout out on their show. So I think that's really cool.
that is, I appreciate you bringing that up on a nice, cool night like this because that is very cool. We like Dude Thoughts. We like Carmen and Gabe. We're into it, and hopefully we'll get to do our second crossover show
I know.
with Dude Thoughts at some point. I'm down for that.
I know. We have Connor and I, for everyone out there in the world, we're announcing it live on our show. Connor and I have challenged Carmen and Gabe to NBA 2K of an us versus them, of a full out all time team, some throwdowns, team of their choice versus team of our choice, and they haven't responded. So I'm gonna call them out right here on our show and say, hey, you guys need to come down. Let's get together. Let's stream some basketball. But we appreciate the shout out. If you haven't seen them, check them out. Their show, Dude Thoughts. They talk about a variety of topics. For our
Hmm.
halftime hot take, which is my favorite segment of our show, we're going to add something. So if you didn't know, Louisiana State University, or known as LSU, or Go Tigers, as Cosedo Duran says, imposed a bowl ban this year, and the reason they did is they triggered a Stage 3 NCAA violation that happened because Odell Beckham Jr. passed out $2,000 to a total of four different players on the field in the Superdome after winning the national championship this year. So he gave out $500 each to four different players. Um, so to do that, to get in front of the violations, LSU imposed a bowl ban. So Connor and I want to talk about that. But before we do, Connor, do you think Odell Beckham washed his hands before he gave them that money?
You know, one would only hope Odell Beckham washed his hands before he handed out that dirty money. Who knows where he got that money? Who knows how he got that money?
Who knows how dirty it was?
Who knows how dirty that money was? Who knows the reason why it took LSU that long to do their investigations on the dirty money from Odell Beckham? Because it was literally on the sidelines and ESPN cameras caught that. So definitely an interesting way to celebrate being an LSU Tiger, OBJ, by handing out that dirty money. And nevertheless, LSU, in a year where they've won 3 football games, have nobly decided to take a 1 year bowl ban. So,
Now
which leads us to our halftime hot take.
we will say that LSU could have been eligible for a game with an under 500 record due to NCAA waive bowl eligibility requirements, which to me sounds like a world of favoritism. That's just an HR dilemma waiting to happen.
Hmm.
But in that case, Connor, I think because LSU was so noble, we need to be just as noble. So you came up with this idea, and I fully support that. We need to impose our own for the rest of the season ban. So what are you banning yourself for the rest of college football season from?
Rutledge, after much investigations to avoid, imposed restrictions, I will be foregoing and banning any eating of kale in my life for the rest of the year. So no kale
Wow.
due to, self-imposed ban of me eating kale. Yeah, there
Wow.
you go.
I also, Stephen, you're challenged in here to join our pledge to ban something for the rest of the year from our lives as part of LSU's bowl ban for the rest of the year, halfway through their season. Me personally, I am going to, as I get in the holiday season, as someone who works in hospitality, I am going to take the personal ban of getting on a plane. I will not, from now until the end of the year, get on an airplane. I'm taking that ban from me. Uh, I'm just not going to air travel. Nothing, I'm going to take that out of my life. So I just wanted to share that LSU, you're doing the noble thing here at French Stream Sports, and um, the kale sales are going to be down and air flight sales are going to be down because we're joining you. We support your decisions.
That was a good halftime hot take. I
That
feel I
was.
feel good getting that off my chest.
I feel lighter now that we shared this.
Yeah, big time.
All right, so let's. Every time I think of LSU, Connor, I just can't go back to. If you're not someone who checks out our YouTube channel, check it out. We post weekly promos for our show, and Connor about put a hole in his drywall with his excitement from tossing his loafer around his house, because for some reason, Marco Wilson. I, I can't even finish the sentence, Connor. I'm just still mad about what happened on Saturday night.
Yeah, I was very surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised that the Gators started slowly because that has quite frankly been the Gators' MO is to start slowly over this past month. But that LSU was first off in position late to win, but they did get some help. You're right. Marco Wilson definitely helped the LSU cause and probably knocked the Gators out of the playoffs. So that was I was into that. That's for sure.
I was getting a haircut today, and I had to explain the whole situation to my barber, and he was in total disbelief. Someone who else is in disbelief is Steven has imposed himself a ban for the rest of the season on throwing his shoes. So,
Wow.
thank you for joining the noble cause that we're supporting here, Steven. That's very kind of you. Um, I, I'm just going to take a minute to say, I did the research. Florida, I believed in you. And I pulled behind you, and Marco Wilson just really pulled like a Howard Dean. You remember Howard Dean back in the election when he was running for president? And just like,
He was a front
yeah!
runner too. He
He
was
was a
into
front
it.
runner. He was into it. He was all the way, and he just yelled super loud. And yeah, it was a great Dave Chappelle sketch. But if you don't know, I am a night owl on our show, and Connor he's an early riser. He gets up at the ungodly time of what, like 3 in the morning every single day?
There have been a few 3 a.m.s throughout this. Although I don't typically want to be up at 3 a.m., there have been a few 3 a.m. mornings.
So on our show, I texted him at 10 o'clock, which I knew was way past his bedtime, just in all caps. I said, how did I give Florida the kiss of death, our patented kiss of death? Because Florida was a 24-point favorite going into this game against the non-bowl eligible Louisiana State University, and they blew it. They just straight blew it. They're I didn't think they needed a run game, and it proved that they did. Kyle Trask is awesome, but
Well, he
what
wasn't
about
so awesome on Saturday
no?
with three
What?
first half interceptions. That I wouldn't call that awesome.
No.
But sorry, go on.
Oh no, it's yeah. My friend, our friend Manny says that he was not surprised that Florida lost, and that they're a top 4 predictable every year. That is true. Florida does get overranked a lot of times. Um, but Kyle Trask, I still think he's a good Heisman frontrunner, or at least in the top Heisman conversation. I think he's got a lot of talent, but it seems like Dan Mullen is not as close as we thought he was. But I just didn't expect the gap to be that big. And I also want to make mention of something that really made me uncomfortable watching it after your bedtime, Connor, was that LSU just looked bigger. Florida's tinier than you think they are. Like in the SEC East, they're okay to hang in there because Georgia's not that, doesn't have as much depth. But LSU had some huge players that made the Gators look like the baby alligators that you accidentally flushed down your toilet. What did you think of seeing Florida against LSU on tape?
Yeah, that's what happens, right? You get when you recruit guys to play in systems, there's always going to be negatives, right? You can't be just like Alabama that can get the biggest and strongest and fastest. You got to pick the kind of players you're going to roll with, and LSU has always had a pretty solid run game. For probably the past decade, Florida has been more of that spread type look with smaller players, things like that. So I think that we can say this as it relates to football. Rutledge, size matters.
Size in football does matter. Speaking of size in football matters, the size and matter of the new college football playoff rankings are huge this week. So I have them in front of me. This is what was released at 7 p.m. this evening for the college football playoffs, and that is we have number 1 Alabama, number 2 Notre Dame, number 3 Clemson, and number 4 Ohio State. 5 is Texas A&M, and 6 is Iowa State going into the playoff weekend. So we have some big championship games coming, Connor. So let's break them down. Which game do you want to start with?
This screen game.
I know I usually it's just the Rutledge screen, which makes no sense, and that screen just blew up my nickel defense.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, hey, let's. I think we've got four big games that we can talk about. So let's start with the ACC. I think that's a real good game to talk about. What are you looking at going into this? What are your thoughts on the rematch of Notre Dame and Clemson?
2 words, 2 obvious words. Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is back. Obviously, their defense needs to tidy it up a little bit because they got ran all over, but I think that you don't beat Dabo the way they did twice. There's a reason Dabo Swinney has gone and gotten his program the way he is because he has a good coaching staff that knows how to make it work. And I believe that this roster can go and counter Notre Dame's run attack and slow it down. If Clemson doesn't stop the run, and they don't get the pass going out of Trevor Lawrence, then they are in trouble. But Clemson puts up 46 points per game. They've allowed 18 points per game, including when they played Notre Dame. So I believe that they have all the pieces in the puzzle. That it will be more surprising to see how Clemson doesn't do well than how Notre Dame does well. If Notre Dame does well and they make Clemson look like imposters, that's going to change the scope of everything. But what's your take on the Clemson-Notre Dame game?
Yeah, first and foremost, I look at this in the scope of the playoff, right? Both the ACC and the SEC championship game, that I think the first piece is in regard to the playoffs. So as of about an hour and a half ago, I saw Clemson as a 10.5-point favorite. I think that's, even though you don't just have Trevor Lawrence back, but you have multiple players on the front 7 back, for Clemson, so to be able to neutralize the Notre Dame running attack, I think that 10.5 points, or 10 points really, that's a big line for this game. And I think that should Notre Dame even lose, and I know we're going to have our picks here later, but should Notre Dame lose but cover, I feel pretty confident that both teams have done enough to prove that they're going to be in the playoffs. I think if you look at it from Notre Dame, I think it's the same formula as last time, right? They do have to force more turnovers than they're used to forcing. Notre Dame, even though they don't allow a ton of yards per game in relation to the ACC as a whole, they're, I believe, as of last week, they were the number one team in that regard. They don't turn the ball over a lot, so they gotta play good, tough defense, limit chunk plays from Clemson, and be able to score just enough points and get Kyron Williams going just enough to win. Just a real slugfest. So I think for Clemson, it's just exactly the opposite. I think if they turn Notre Dame over, get Notre Dame as one-dimensional, I think that Clemson could end this game real quickly and probably knock Notre Dame out of the playoffs if Clemson rolls. So that's kind of how I feel going into that. And what a great interception by my Raider defender over there.
You did what Florida could not do to LSU, which was stop the slant. LSU proved my Madden point all Saturday night long, which was just let them run the slant. Just run the slant, and you're going to win games. It blew up in my face. To all of our podcast listeners out there, the score right now is 13-3 as we play Broncos versus Raiders in Mile High Stadium with, I don't even know what uniform I picked tonight. I look like a high school.
That's usually how we try to do it. We want to make sure somebody looks like they're a high school team.
We really do. Would we see this in our neighborhood, or would this be just a game that we would see? There we go. That's a sack. All right. As we go, we have a lot of great chatter tonight on Twitch tonight. Our commentators are Stephen and Manny are debating over the fact that Iowa State lost to the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, which is Louisiana a good team or not? Well, they beat the famous Georgia Southern University, so in my opinion, if you can beat Georgia Southern, you're a good football team, because Georgia Southern is a great football team. But back to our highlight weeks. So let's get the big elephant in the room out of the way. Let's roll some Tide around here, Connor. By the way, Tide, if you'd like to be our sponsor, we would love to have you sponsor our show. I need to do laundry. But let's talk about the SEC Championship game. And I want to just sort of point out something that happened. Nick Saban is hungry. I think that being out of some games with COVID, I think just kind of the serious pandemic, maybe he's getting a little older and Mrs. Saban is putting on the pressure for him to retire and spend time with the grandkids. He yelled at his defense when they were playing Arkansas when they were up, I think it was like 45-3, and then they went and forced a turnover. So Nick Saban is that, not just I'm going to cruise through Nick Saban, but he has a stacked team. Mac Jones, Devonta Smith, and Najee Harris are all Heisman finalists. So is Kyle Trask. But Bama is that Bama we're used to seeing. Steve Sarkisian is running that offense up and down. No one has time to even score against them, so the Tide is rolling out of Tuscaloosa. Connor, how do you feel about this SEC championship game, and are you going to throw your shoes again this weekend?
I sure hope I don't get to throw my shoes this weekend. And I know we're picking later, but here's the deal. Florida starts out slow again. This could not just be an Alabama victory, but it could get really ugly really fast. With that, the Gators in a lot of ways might not feel like they have a lot to play for. They're already kind of out of the playoffs, and they had that big letdown there. And I know Kyle Trask said, I'll focus on Alabama, but man, that's hard when you were potentially to get into the playoffs to have that happen to you. I mean, that's a big deal. So, man, and in terms of Nick Saban yelling at his defense, that is not an out of the usual thing. Nick Saban actually does that a fair amount. As I get sacked is another thing that happens a fair amount. Nick Saban talks about, in essence, you coach, or how does he say it? He says, you allow the things to happen that happen, more or less, right? If you coach, if you're to let the emotional gas down when you're up 45-3, that's on you as a coach. So I think Nick Saban, even though he might not be the most beloved coach in college football, I think that he finally a touchdown for the Raiders. I think that he's good at putting guys in the NFL because he makes sure his players are focused all game long. So I think that there's a lot of emotions that are going to be going into this game for sure.
Huge game in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which actually our viewer Manny and I went to together. That is the coolest place I've ever been. I was like a little, oh, we're not going for the onside kick.
I found it ironic that they have a Chick-fil-A in the stadium, although most of the Falcons' home games are on Sundays.
They also have $3 Sweetwater beers, which I found, and we had a really good time. It was an Orlando City Atlanta United game. I was the only Orlando fan, and all the Atlanta fans around me said just feel sorry for them because we lost I think it was 3-0 that day.
Oh, jeez.
It was before this year, before the glory days as we call them. And there's a tackle in the backfield. All right. Yeah, Nick Saban he's got it going. And you're right. We're going to pick that game later, but I think it's pretty alluring to what we're going to pick. So now we're going to move on to our next championship game as we're less than 2 minutes to go in this game. And really just got to run out the clock. We have the unbalanced Big Ten matchup of Ohio State and their destiny for a 1-game season to get them into the college football playoff. So, Connor, before we talk about Ohio State Northwestern, you and I are big eye test believers. Do we even feel like Ohio State...
The slant.
With the slant, man. Do we even feel like Ohio State has something to give? Because their eye test is starting to corrode, in my opinion. When you play just such bad teams, you don't have an eye test to test, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, their best win was against Indiana right now. People aren't giving Northwestern a chance. I think that this, even though Ohio State kind of hemmed and hawed and folks figured out a way to get them in, Northwestern could really muck this game up, right? Northwestern could really make this game an issue, and it could be a real big time issue if, let's say, Ohio State even just sneaks by as a 10-point victor. Who's to say that they can't? Who's to say Northwestern really can't give Ohio State problems? I think in terms of the playoffs, Ohio State, if Ohio State goes and wins by 60, that's one thing. But, man, if it's a 24-17 kind of game, well, if it's a 24-17 kind of game, Northwestern could win that kind of game. But, you've got a lot of things to just remember, right? If you're Ohio State, the pressure got turned up incredibly high by getting you into this game.
Yeah. They have to perform. If they don't perform, then why are you even there? You're just going to make your conference look worse. Mm-hmm. So this is all on the Big Ten for this game to be competitive. If this is a blowout, it's really going to hurt them for the games to come, especially since Harbaugh is not going anywhere. And sure, Lovie Smith's out at Illinois, but no one's really paid attention to Illinois since that one year they ended up in the Rose Bowl somehow. No, that's an all-out blitz. As we move on, let's talk about our fourth championship game, and that is the Big 12. Iowa State and their balanced offense is coming to take on Oklahoma. Connor, I like this game, and I like Iowa State in this game. I really feel like Iowa State kind of has a chance. The Big 12 has always been known for throw the ball further and faster than the other guy, but if Iowa State can rattle the rattler of Oklahoma, I think Lincoln Riley doesn't have his normal championship-winning quarterback, and I really think that they have a shot here. They can move the ball on the ground, they can move the ball around. They really have good potential to sort of make something work. So how are you feeling about the Cyclones going into this game?
I feel good about the Cyclones going into this game, actually, as you get the win here. But I think that the one thing Iowa State has to overcome is not being in this game, and Oklahoma having been in this game and won this game in the past 4 years. But watching the game before, right? It's not that Oklahoma called bad defense. Man, the amount of missed tackles that Oklahoma had on defense to let Iowa State do their thing was pretty remarkable. And I think that if the big question for me is if Oklahoma's ready to tackle, because it seemed like there was a lot of good defense called, and the players just didn't execute. So does that change that Oklahoma is in the Big 12 title game and Iowa State now has a bright light shined on them? We got to see and figure that out. But Ohio State or Iowa State is definitely going to be up for the challenge, as Coach Matt Campbell says they have that 5-star culture. So we got to see for sure.
It's going to be a wild championship weekend. I can't wait. I'm going to be locked in all about it. Connor, do you want to let's take 15 seconds and talk about our possibilities to think about Texas A&M getting in. Give me your take, because you're still sporting that 12th man.
I think A&M gets in with a Clemson loss or a tight Ohio State win or an Ohio State loss. I think that's how A&M gets in. What do you think?
I'm with you on that. I think A&M is possible because there's literally the ACC is facing each other in the championship game. I don't see it. If Notre Dame blows out Clemson, I think A&M is in, pending that, as long as the other two teams in the top 4 win, Ohio State and Alabama. I want to see Iowa State go into the playoff. I think that would be wild to have them represent the Big 12. I think it'd be just so cool. But it has to be the blow-up scenario. You know, they are number 6. But in order to get that, Bama probably needs to lose, Ohio State needs to lose, A&M needs to lose, even Cincinnati needs to lose. There has to be so much to happen for the committee to comfortably shove them in. But I think it would just be really cool to see a team that their other famous thing was just blowing up Brandon Whedon's season at Oklahoma State. So I think it'd be neat to see them actually in the playoff.
Amen. So that is that's how I feel about A&M.
All right, that's how I feel about Iowa State. But now it's time for picks. So to our viewers out there that are still watching, and to everyone, we are picking this week. We are picking Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida, Bama, Northwestern Ohio State, and Oklahoma, Iowa State. So, Connor, give me your picks. Notre Dame, Clemson, who you got first?
I don't think Clemson's 10.5 points better, but I think that Clemson is at least 1 point better, taking the Tigers.
I'm taking the Tigers. Good players do good things at good times, and Trevor Lawrence is a good football player. So I think they have potential to do a lot of good, so I am going with the Clemson Tigers. Next is the Florida Gators and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Connor, your take.
This one could get ugly. If Florida has to really improve off of their recent slow starts for it to not be ugly. In my opinion, this game has the potential to be over by halftime for the Tide, picking Alabama.
This one feels kind of like it's going to be when South Carolina played Cam Newton and the Auburn Tigers in the SEC championship game. You know, I hate to down Florida that much just because of one shoe throw, but that slow offense, you can't be slow against this Alabama offense. So Bama's going to win it. We have Steven also takes Bama. Steven also takes Clemson. So next one, Northwestern, Ohio State. In everything we've talked about the Big Ten tonight, I have to go Ohio State. You know, I know Northwestern is who's up there and who's competitive, but I think Ohio State will blow them out, blow the doors out, beat Northwestern heavy-handedly, but I think it makes their resume look worse, not their resume look better. So what do you think, Connor?
Yeah. In Northwestern, they got a lot of smart football players and a good scheme and a really good coach. But you know, Ohio State's got more guys playing on Sundays, and I think that they are going to. It's not like this is their first time playing under pressure, so I expect Ohio State to meet that pressure and succeed on Saturday over Northwestern.
Last game before we take it away for the week is Oklahoma versus Iowa State. Connor, break this one down.
You know, as I mentioned before, Iowa State has, and you know, they have to overcome not being there and not having the spotlight shined on them. Oklahoma's really turned things around. I think because Oklahoma's been there and done that multiple times. I expect the Sooners to boomer, and you know, the tacklers to be ready to tackle. I'm going for the Sooners here in this Big 12 title game. What say you, Rutledge?
I'm taking Iowa State. Let's see something wild happen. College football's best when something crazy happens. I want to see the Cyclones do it. I think they can do it. I believe in them. I think the coaching staff can get behind them. I think they can drive that 5-star culture and make it work. Is it tough? Yeah, like you said, when you're not used to being there. And this like shout out to this fan base. They stick behind this team, and especially when you're bad. Most of us don't like to go to bad games, but Iowa State fans, when even on House of Cards, when the main characters of House of Cards went to the state of Iowa and said, "Hello, Hawkeye Nation," meaning they were just recognizing Iowa, not Iowa State. For you to stick with your team in your area, um, let's go. Let's see some Cyclones. Let's do some damage. So I think they can do it. I think they have it in them. We'll just see how they balance. Steven takes Oklahoma. Steven takes Ohio State. All right, Connor. We want to say a thank you to everyone who came out to see us. Once again, our challenge is on the table for Dude Thoughts. Carmen and Gabe, bring your game. Let's play some basketball. We want to
Let's
take you.
do it.
We want to bring it down where we will be 1-0 in 2021. I have won Madden again. Return to my winning days. It feels good to be back. Connor, anything to say before we go tonight?
Can't wait to be picking games again, but you bested me this week.
I will pick the next game, and maybe it'll be possibly just as lopsided. But until then, have a great championship week, everyone. Make sure to check us out on Twitch, on Facebook, on our podcast. We're Friends Stream Sports, and I'm Rutledge. And have a great night.